Now, when you think of the Afghan economy, what comes to mind? Well, besides opium production and narcotics trafficking? Well, according to the United States and also Afghan officials, Afghanistan could eventually become one of the most important mining centers in the world. Now, this after a story in the New York Times says that the United States has discovered nearly $1 trillion worth of mineral deposits in the war-torn nation.
But American scientists say Afghanistan has natural resources that could transform the nation. A presidential spokesman says a new review has identified as much as $1 trillion worth of resources, including iron, copper, cobalt, gold, and lithium. In a visit to Washington last month, Afghan President Hamid Karzai said the value could be up to $3 trillion.
It's very heartening that Afghanistan has a very bright future if the Afghan mineral reserves are properly extracted, and we hope that this will be a resource for Afghanistan which will make Afghanistan self-sufficient in the forthcoming future.
Geologists have known for decades that Afghanistan contains substantial mineral resources, but the resources have never been fully exploited because of decades of armed conflict, lack of transportation, power, and other infrastructure needs.
But are these findings really new information, or did other nations, including the United States, know about this for years?
Based upon early work that the Soviets conducted in the 1980s, the USGS, the United States Geologic Survey, went back into Afghanistan starting in 2004 and started doing a survey for economic deposits of important minerals like copper, iron, lithium in Afghanistan. So certainly the lithium deposits are not that common. These are salts that rapidly erode into the ocean, so finding them on land is difficult. With the rise in the electronics industry, the need for lithium is only going to increase. And so you can imagine these are worth quite a bit of money.
And also, what could the recent reports mean for the future of Afghanistan? Well, joining me with more, investigative journalist Webster Tarpley. So Webster, the headlines here, at least in the New York Times piece, read that, this discovery goes far beyond any previously known reserves. But even in that New York Times article, they go on to say that, there were these charts, this documentation that was there for decades, starting with the Soviets there, right, in the 80s, and then geologists back there in 2004, again in 2006, in 2007, apparently more reports were published. They say it sort of collected dust. They sat on this for a few years. So talk about the timing here. I mean, why did this article come out now?
Well, as you correctly say, there's nothing new here. They have discovered nothing. The discoveries, if there were some, were made by the Soviets during the 1980s. There's a World Bank report from 2004 that has all of this stuff. At the time of Karzai coming here to Washington about a month ago with Hillary Clinton meeting, there was a bunch of talk about the mineral wealth of Afghanistan. So it's a very important thing, but it's not new. So the question is, what are we dealing with here? This is a planted story in the New York Times by James Risen, who has chosen to become the stenographer of people in the Pentagon.
Well, why would he do that? I mean, what is in it for the New York Times? I mean, I've heard people say this, but what does the New York Times have anything to do with this? I mean, again, what's in it for them?
The New York Times is, let's say, politically available for all kinds of projects. Now, in this case, why don't we look at the article? Who is the only top U.S. official mentioned in the article? It's General David Petraeus, the commander of the CENTCOM, the Central Command. Now, people in Washington know that he is an active candidate for president. He is being groomed by the neocon faction of the Republican Party. He was made American Enterprise Institute Man of the Year. He's got Max Boot. He's got the Kagan family. He's got Frank Gaffney.
Well, he hasn't come out and said that, but he was quoted as saying, let's get back to this issue, not necessarily Petraeus, but he did say that there's stunning potential here.
Stunning potential. So basically, it's a way of running for president, you might say.
Well, what does that have to do with the...
Don't go into the primaries. What he's saying is, make me president, and we can exploit this wealth. Whereas with Obama, the wimp, he's going to leave. He's going to start pulling out in 1 year. So it's a way to make the following appeal.
But wait a second. I mean, we have Barack Obama in power now, and according to this report, the Pentagon task force has already started sort of reaching out to companies, trying to take advantage of people who have expertise in mining. So I'm not sure that this has too much to do with the administration. But Webster, I do want to touch on the point that, you know, they found these things in the southern and eastern regions of Afghanistan. This is where a lot of the violence takes place. We can't forget, you know, number one, there's a war here right now. So bring that into the equation also.
The purpose of the planted story is, at the higher level, as you say, is to organize a consensus to keep the war going. It basically says to interest groups in the United States, the corporate world, Wall Street, mineral companies, mining companies, we should stay. And it also makes very clear, if you don't stay, the Chinese will get everything. The Chinese have already gotten a copper mine, and they're going to feast on all this wealth.
Well, China is definitely
the other level, though, is also the European NATO partners, right? We have the new conservative government in Britain. And Cameron was just in Afghanistan, and he said, you know, we're going to get out of here as soon as we can. In Poland, they've demanded an exit strategy. In Germany, 70% of the people are completely fed up with this. So it's also an appeal to the NATO partners, stay. Remember the use of military contracts in Iraq? France and Germany got none, and the people who joined in got some. So it's basically saying, we'll give you a piece of the action. Be you a U.S. interest group or a NATO partner now thinking of leaving.
But now officials are saying, hey, this is going to be the new backbone of the Afghan economy. But let's not forget, you know, you don't build a mining industry overnight. I mean, this stuff could take decades. You know, they have no expertise.
Of course not. These are neocon promises. Petraeus is now the head of the war party. He's the head of the neocon faction, or their figurehead. Remember, in Iraq, the neocons said, we can loot the oil of Iraq and pay for the whole war and get rich in the process and control the price of oil worldwide. All stories. And in this case, there's obviously some real mineral wealth there, but the idea that the U.S. is going to cash in on that, I think, is quite far-fetched. The main content is, don't start pulling out in 1 year. Stay, fight the war, have a prolonged war, and you can get rich in the process.
Well, the other interesting thing that this article points out is that, look, this could create more incentives for the Taliban to say, hey, we have these resources, we have these minerals, let's keep on fighting, because there's no way that we can lose control of this country, especially with these findings, right? So it goes both ways.
Naturally, the Taliban, I think, are going to keep fighting. The Taliban are winning right now, right? The other thing is there's a great deal of defeatism, not only in NATO, but also here inside the United States. The month of June has been disastrous, right? The casualty rates are very, very high. It's about as bad as any month in Iraq. And then you've also got other people who are flaking off, right? Charlie Rangel from Harlem has said Obama is comparable to Bush and Cheney in his lies about these wars. So there's a great deal of disaffection. So the idea is give people some pie in the sky, and maybe you can keep the war going for a little bit longer. I think it's likely to fail. But that's what this planted story, I think, is designed to do.
There's a mineral rush taking place in a country ravaged by decades of conflict, with an estimated $1 to $3 trillion worth of wealth buried under its land. Its deposits include copper, iron ore, precious gems, gold, and lithium. It's that last deposit of lithium that's making countries like India, Russia, the United States, and China desperate to get their hands on its reserves. Today, we are decoding why Afghanistan is considered the new Saudi Arabia of lithium. There are currently 6 top lithium producers in the world. Bolivia has about 1/4 of the entire global resource, with an estimated 21 million tons of it, including the world's single largest deposit, the Salar de Uyuni salt flat, which is visible even from space. Argentina and Chile are the second and third largest producers worldwide. Lithium is a key component in batteries and other electronics that are becoming increasingly common, particularly in electric vehicles and large-scale battery storage. Governments are looking to reduce carbon emissions and dependency on oil by going green. That means storing renewable energy and making combustion engines a thing of the past. It's argued lithium will help make that possible with other tech advances. Currently, motor companies and mobile phone manufacturers use lithium-ion batteries to power their products. For example, India is the world's second largest producer of mobile phones behind China, and the Narendra Modi government is keen for access to deposits in Afghanistan to power its own telecoms industry. China has monopolized the current lithium market, controlling 80% of the world's raw material, refining 77% of the world's cell capacity, and 60% of global component manufacturing. So, how do we know Afghanistan has the largest lithium deposits? Well, through years of invasion and occupation. Afghanistan's mineral wealth was discovered in geological surveys during Russia's occupation of the country from 1979 to 1989. After Russia left, the Taliban shaped the country's narrative before the war on terror reshaped it. An international coalition bombed and occupied Afghanistan. It was then time for American geologists to verify Russia's research and conduct their own. By 2009, when Hamid Karzai was Afghan president, a Pentagon analysis at one location in Ghazni province showed the potential for lithium deposits as large as those of Bolivia. Years later, US President Donald Trump hoped that Afghanistan's lithium deposits could help repay some of the nearly $1 trillion the Americans had spent in occupying the country. Mining Afghanistan's minerals would be easy if the landlocked country had access to a nearby port as well, once lithium was pulled out of the ground. And of course, there are national and international actors who use Afghanistan's instability to profit. China has been moving behind the scenes to smooth its way into the country, and that has meant dealing with corrupt state and non-state actors alike. These groups illegally mine and sell minerals in areas under their control to fund purchases of weapons from supportive countries. So while Afghanistan may be sitting on untold trillions in lithium deposits, there isn't much hope they'll be able to fund the rebuilding of the country until it becomes clear who will control all of it. And while Afghan leaders embezzle millions of dollars of ill-gotten wealth, ordinary Afghans continue to live in poverty. Is that fair?
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not.
Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling?
None whatsoever. Zero. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comfortable. The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
Don't you bear some responsibility for the outcome if the Taliban ends up back in control and women end up losing the rights?
No, I don't. Do I bear responsibility? Zero responsibility.